Today, I'm going to look at Jesus walking on the water, and this is actually one of the seventh miracle of John. And you can see the little map here. Will show you the journey as I'm speaking. Now, here come the extraordinary story of Jesus defying laws of nature and controlling the natural elements. In John 6:16 to verse 24. And we have here the shortest account of this story, when actually both Matthew and Mark are telling this story, but slightly longer and more on from the perspective of the disciple. Now, to give you some context, the story happens between two major events. And on paper, it looks like those two events, these 2 days, are the most important one, but we will see it's not the case. On the first day, the crowd had gathered to Jesus because he had performed so many signs and wonders. They followed him, and the feeding of the 5,000 happened, and that's what Katrina talked about last week. And on the second day, he revealed to the crowd that the most important thing is to believe in him because he is the bread of life. And between these two amazing days, here comes this little passing few verses, very little, but powerful story is told about Jesus walking on the water. Now, the whole purpose of this little story in the middle there is to show that Jesus is not just a mere man, uh, you know, or a prophet who does signs and wonder, but he is also God. He is fully God because he can actually control natural elements, and only God can do that. And the purpose is to really draw the attention to, from the crowd, so the crowd would realize who he is really, as he is about to say to them, I am the bread of life. And we know that because in verse 25, when finally they reached the other side of the lake, people asked, but Jesus, when did you get there? So their faces were really like astounded. They were like astonished. They were thinking, man, how come Jesus got there? I mean, I didn't see him taking the boat, and maybe they left, before actually Jesus set, and Jesus arrived before them. So they were very confused. But it's really, this story is to manifest God's glory and reveal Jesus as glorious, much more than just a person who has a bit of power and does signs and wonder. Now, this is what we know. After feeding and ministering to the crowd, Jesus' disciple went ahead, and Jesus took himself apart to pray. The previous verses mentioned that he knew that the crowd wanted to make him king. They had this idea that they could have like a king of the Jews, a new political leader that would help them to get rid of the Roman occupation. Now, it's very likely that Jesus took himself in that place to refresh and refocus, to spend time with his Father, to ready himself for the next mission, for the next day. So at the end of this very tiring but very successful day, Jesus took himself apart to pray, avoiding the adulation of the crowd, finding some space and quiet. And this is really the first point I would like to make, that Jesus focused on the importance of his relationship to the Father. He focused on his dependency to the Father while in the mission. He knew who he was, he knew his called, but most of all, he kept his eyes on the big picture, on what matters. He did not revel in his success. He kept focused and, most importantly, connected to the source of life. There's in that a big lesson for us, to make intimacy with God the number one goal in our lives, the foundation. Before success, before power, before anything, this is what will anchor us, that we are to not hesitate to stop, to not rush ahead, but steady our souls and feed and fill our spirit with the God of all hope. That's what will keep us on track. Now, the disciple went ahead in a boat to Capernaum. And Jesus, of course, fully knew that they were going to encounter a storm. But notice, Jesus is not flapping around. He's not doing a Martha on us. He doesn't go like, oh, where is the boat? What kind of boat could I have? Am I going to walk? Am I going to cross? How would I be reunited with the disciple? All these questions, they do not concern him the slightest. This is another thing. He's not even worried about the storm that is coming. So that's another point here. Jesus doesn't seem worried at all about the difficult logistic of the event, and he doesn't seem to be concerned at all about the circumstances. He is a way maker. He is the God of the impossible. And we learn that we can lean onto him. We can depend on him for all of our resources. We can depend on him for wisdom. Why should we be worried if he was not worried? Now we are about to learn that he is God, that he has all power, that heaven's power, heaven's law completely differed from our earthly laws. So in effective, it makes Jesus God. It makes him limitless. It makes, possibilities become endless with God. Too many times we try to do things in our own way, in our own strength, when what we need is to learn to lean on him. So now the text said that the disciples found themselves in the storm. So they've been rowing, and it's been hard work because they found themselves in the storm. And it's important to note here that being in a storm is not necessarily a sign that you are not in the will of God. John actually said the disciple went ahead, but if we read into the other accounts in Matthew and Mark, it says here that they were sent ahead by Jesus. So the disciples were not disobediently going ahead. Actually, we could argue, sorry, I'm trying to change the slide here. We could argue that it's their obedience that led them in the storm. It's because they were doing the mission with Jesus that they found themselves in the storm. They could have stayed on a couch doing nothing, but no, they were in the mission with Jesus. So difficulties in life are not systematically a sign that God is disciplining us or a sign that we are not in the will of God. If you find yourself in the storm, protect your heart. Do not listen to the voice who are accusing you or blaming you. Okay? It's true sometimes God can come and correct, but we just heard of it with Joe, correction of the Lord is gentle. It's from a loving Father. So do not tremble under accusation when you find yourself in the storm. Now, if you keep yourself in relationship and in obedience to God, and you find yourself in the storm, there is actually an opportunity to encounter God in the midst of the storm. And he is here with you to bring wisdom to you and solution. Like in the story, there is opportunity for an extra miracle because we see Jesus walks on water, but then he quieted the storm. That's the second miracle that happened in this story. So the disciples were 3-4 miles away in the storm, and Jesus was crossing the lake on foot. I mean, imagine that. It's just amazing, isn't it? I love that scene in the shack in the film where Jesus, is actually kind of running onto the lake. And so you imagine Jesus walking on water. What a sight. Now, it's not very clear what was the intention of Jesus at the time. We're not sure if his purpose was just crossing the lake or actually to come towards the disciple. The reason we're not very sure is actually in Mark, it says he was about to pass them. Other translation like ESV says he meant to pass them. But Matthew said he came to them. So I think you see here, there's a little bit of room for interpretation. I actually think that Jesus was focused on this mission. The purpose of Jesus was to go to the other side of the lake to carry on his mission. But he was kind of keeping an eye for his disciple. And actually, when he saw his disciple and when they saw him, they got scared. So he had to reassure them, and he did eventually boarded the boat. So I think his intention was to cross the lake, but he got arrested by the disciples' need. Um, and in here, you've got this second encounter miracle where Jesus calmed the storm. Okay, and you can read in Matthew the whole account where Peter does as well, walking to water by learning to fix his eye on Jesus and trust him. So Jesus stopped in the middle of the lake to rescue his disciple. And this made me think about the heart of Jesus. You know, Heidi Baker often speaks about stopping for the one. Her mission might be the revival of Mozambique, but she will still stop and love the individuals in front of her, one by one. She will nurture them into full restoration. I feel Jesus was doing that. He was on his way to preach the most amazing preach, like I am the bread of life, but he stops for his disciple. And I feel we need to do the same in life. Yeah, we reveal we're doing the kingdom, and the way we're doing it is to stop for the one. Now the story finishes with this little sentence. Then the disciples were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the other shore. That's John 6, verse 21. So there is this astonished little verse that Jesus come and somehow they arrived very quickly to their destination. Notice their destination is slightly different than what they planned at the beginning. At the beginning, they set up for Capernaum, but they ended up in Gennesaret. I found that amazing because I think sometimes that's what happened with God. You think you're sailing one way, and you end up in another place. But you know what? God is in the midst. God is with you, and that's what matters. There's no explanation and description about the rest of the journey here. We just know Jesus came to stop and they found themselves arrive. And some account and some people think there has been something supernatural by which maybe time and space changed there, and the boat suddenly was propulsed to the shore. But honestly, when we look at immediately, the word immediately in the Greek, it means straight away, in no time, shortly after. So I think it's most likely that the second part of the journey was a breeze. It was easy. It felt no time comparing at the very first part where they had to row, and it was really, really hard. And for me, that's the greatest miracle of most. Once they accepted Jesus on board, the miraculous, the supernatural of God entered too. The storm was finished and the journey was easy and faster than expected. Let's say that the second half was not characterized by heavy, laborious rowing. And it's a wonderful picture of what happened when we trust and let Jesus in charge. He carries the burden and the breakthrough comes. It doesn't mean that when we become a Christian, boom, everything becomes easy. We just saw that they were in the will of God and they found themselves in the storm. Their obedience meant that they found themselves in the storm. But it means that with Jesus in the midst, things happen and our burden is lightened. So now to conclude, the purpose of the story, and I can see I forgot to change my slide, but it doesn't matter. The purpose of the story is to manifest the glory of God and to reveal Jesus as the Son of God, as only God can control the laws of nature. The crowd had followed him around, but they needed to know, and the disciple needed to know, that Jesus is much more than a powerful man or a powerful prophet. He is the Son of God. And all of that in order to take the message that he is about to preach, that he is the bread of life. I think this story is to provoke our faith, is to provoke us to believe that Jesus is the God of the impossible, is the waymaker. It prepares our heart and sets us hungry for it, that we will realize that he is the source of all life. It should be our staple diet, our bread of life, because Jesus is life itself, and life flows when we get to know him. Amen.